Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Margaret Pinard. I am an author and the host of the topic of today's live, May of the Moderns, a May readathon. It's where we're reading books written, published, or translated between 1901 and 1945. And for today's live, I've got a special guest who I thought would be great to talk to about modern literature because she takes it very seriously. Sandy, Ms. Reads a lot. Welcome.
So excited to be here.
Yay. So tell us a little bit about what brought you into the moderns, because I know it was a big reason behind you starting a channel as well, right?
Yeah, I a number of years ago was looking for what to read next and just had no real idea and stumbled across the 1001 books you must read before you die list.
Monster.
And this book has a ton in that particular time period. And it's also organized by time period. So it's very easy to go in and see which ones I've already read, which ones I have coming up in this particular book. So that's what got me started kind of reading in that particular time period, is that big project, and is really why I started my channel, because I started documenting my way through the 1001 books. So yeah, it's been fun so far.
And I've got in my head the font that you use for every number that you do, and you count down however many you do each month, which is great.
Yeah.
Yes,
I change colors every 100. So yeah, right now it's purple.
Ambitious, very ambitious.
It is, but it's a passion project I've been working on for a long time. And then when I got close to 1,000 left, because there's actually 5 editions of the book, which means there's 1,300 books on the list. And when I got close to having 1,000 left is when I started my channel. So yeah, it's
just imagine if you'd picked up that 500 places you should go before you die book instead.
Yeah, my husband probably would like that one as well.
Nice.
So, but no, I'm such a, I drive him crazy because I always have a book in my hand, either a physical book, a digital book, an audio book, something, all the time.
Speaking my love language there. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a current modern read? Because we're wrapping up the month here. We're a couple days away from the end of May. And I've gotten 6 that I'm on my 7th, which is Frank O'Connor, short story Irish writer. He's pretty interesting. Do you have a current read, or are you done with what you're going to be doing this year?
Well, I ended up only being able to read one book in that time period, but in my defense, it was this one, The Man Without Qualities.
Oh, is that the 1,700 page volume?
1,700 page 2 volume thing. So I feel like that should count for about 6 books. I do.
Right.
But this one is an interesting one because for the time period, it was originally published in 1938. But then there was another version in 1966, I believe, after he had passed away. And I do have a slight bone to pick with this book, which is the actual book is only 1,100 pages. And then there's 20 chapters of additional chapters, and then 400 pages of notes, alternate endings, character development, things like that with it. It's oh no. So yeah.
But I thought you were going to say appendices, like explanations or references or other biographers, but no, just really in his work.
Interesting. Yep. Yeah. Someone took all of his posthumous papers and put them in the volume, which I have over there. This is volume 1. Wow. So, and then the other thing with it is it's unfinished at 1,130 pages. So you don't get resolution to any part of the story or what happens to the characters. And so it's just so frustrating. Such a frustrating
what a fun romp. And now I am at the same place where we started.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so this ended up being the main one. I had wanted to read A Room with a View, but that got postponed to June. So I could read it with Marilyn Maya Mendoza. And I still have in my head that I might make it to Out of Africa. That was my other one for May of the Moderns for this month. So yeah, but that one, I'm a tad bit frustrated with that book.
Understandable. Yep. Well, I want to say hello to the people in the chat now that we're a few minutes in and people may have noticed that we're live. Yeah. So hello to RC and Easy Graphics popping by to hit like. Richard Holiday coming in saying, woo, obviously a fan of modern literature, I suppose. Yeah, we're using nicknames. Annalise is here. Hello.
Hi.
And we're talking about fonts. Yes, we're having a graphic discussion because people are graphic designers in the chat.
Nice.
Hamilton Thompson, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Yeah, well.
Bonnets were not a thing. Bonnets were out in the 20th century, Richard, so I am off the hook. Ooh, finishing the month with Native Son. That's on my like one that got away list, which I will get to in a little bit.
I have that one on my list for the Big Book Summer Challenge as a possibility for this summer, because I'd like to get the bigger books I have for this year done. So yeah, that would be nice. Are you enjoying it, Hamilton? Curious.
Yes, tell us. I have a question of the day for y'all to think about in the chat if you would like. What are your summer reading goals or plans, if you have any?
Nice.
Because as I have said a few times, like this is the last time I'm going to host May of the Moderns, and next Sunday is when I'll be doing my like wrap up of my May of the Moderns, and you'll see why.
I didn't realize this was your last time.
My stats. Yeah, I was kind of looking at it and going, it's just become another thing to do with a lot of busy work, but I'm not really, connecting with many people through it. So I'm just gonna like let it go and move on to something else that interests me because shiny, right? That's how I work. But I've got a couple that I'm gonna be reading this summer, just like you just said.
Nice.
The one that got away, one of them was a Jean Reese book. Do you know Jean Reese?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think I've read anything.
She wrote the modern adaptation of Jane Eyre that was like the Caribbean viewpoint, and now I'm it's about the ocean or the body of, I'm blanking on the title now, but the one I'm going to be reading is called Voyage in the Dark.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, it's like a West Indian 1920s, one of her earlier works. And so I'm going to try to read that for June.
The name sounds familiar, so I'm imagining there's books on my list by that.
Someone in the chat will tell us, right? Someone in the chat will rescue us.
Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Wide Sargasso Sea. There it is. I knew it was a body of water.
That's my book club pick. Oh my gosh. That's my book club pick for September.
Oh, see? There you go. See, they'll just be sprinkled throughout. It's still a good mix.
Also, Good Morning Midnight and Quartet on my list.
The Quartet is a book with 4 books. Oh, no. It's packed now because Voyage in the Dark is in there. Leaving Mr. Mackenzie is in there. Quartet is in there. I have a omnibus edition, and I think Quartet is in there. So maybe that's why I'm thinking there's 4 books, but it's called Quartet, but that's only one of the books. Okay. All right. So Jean Reese is one of the ones that I did not get to read, but hopefully next month. What about actual favorites?
One of my favorites, which I of course don't actually have here because I gave it away in a giveaway, is Kristen Lavren's Daughter by Sigrid. Such a good book. It's 3 books kind of in one big bind up, but I love that character quite a bit, and just the journey she went on. It had a pretty good arc for her, and all of what happened to her in her life was based off of something that happened when she was so young, and then everything after that just was spiraled because of that. So it's a little more brutal than I expected in places too. Like someone's hand gets chopped off. It's like, yikes. So, but that's one of my favorites.
It works for Horror Mayhem. There you go.
It was one of my big books for last summer, actually.
Okay. That's because you had an edition. I think I had like the young adult version when I was younger, and they were in smaller editions or volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we wouldn't have qualified, I guess. But that's a nice one.
Yeah, it's a big one though. I mean, it's a
a big all one. The volumes together.
Yeah.
It says about at the halfway point, about 450 pages total.
Nice.
Bigger Thomas is an interesting character in Native Son. Interesting. Yeah. you start to feel like when you read enough of these moderns, you get more of a sense of like what things mean and things make more sense. Because I think when I first started reading, there was a lot that didn't make sense, and I was just trying to go with the flow and see if it made sense later. And
Yeah.
it's like, when you're in a language, nothing makes sense until you read several and you're like, oh, they're all referencing this, and now I understand why that's important, and you sort of immerse yourself. So
It also feels like just very heavy. I know this one is very heavy. Hi, Kellyanne. In philosophy. Like this is
oh,
just all big snippets of philosophy with a little bit of story. Another one would have been The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Same
oh,
kind of thing. Lots of philosophy, lots of kind of deeper meaning to it. And that can be really difficult in there. But this one is, I would say 90% philosophy, 10% story.
is that author German as well?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
Musil.
The German philosophy. I find some similarities here.
Isn't Thomas Mann also German? I think so.
Maybe.
Have you read any Thomas Mann? Okay. He's not for everyone. He's not my favorite. So, but I know like The Magic Mountain, we read it last year. I think Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads read it, host a readathon last year. And a lot of people really, really loved it. And I read it for the story and couldn't quite get all of the philosophical components of it. I just don't know if I need to reread it when I'm read more or something. But sometimes I feel like I'm not quite smart enough for some of these books, but
I was getting Magic Mountain confused with Seven Story Mountain just now, but that's M. Scott Peck. So there we go. That's the mystery in my head. That was just
yeah.
yeah. Okay. I just had a buddy read with Greg for a very short book called The Underdogs about the Mexican Revolution.
Oh, wow.
It was very short and he didn't have much to say about it. I don't think there was much like meat to it, but it was an interesting book, and we did have like interesting differing viewpoints, I will say. I don't know if anyone can pull that out of
He's also reading this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I've seen both yours and his sort of take on the episodic daily life and trudge.
It's not a good one to do a buddy read with at all, because there's just not a lot to talk about. Because there's not a lot of story in there, and the most interesting person, you don't get like the resolution to their story. So,
which is interesting because we've both had a buddy read with Greg. It was too short to be a good buddy read, and that one's too long and not much story still to be a good buddy read. So,
yeah. But Greg's a great buddy reader. Absolutely. So, yeah.
All right. So I had some favorites that I had popped into the Modern Lit sort of survey video I did a few weeks ago. And like The Octopus was a really fun buddy read. Passage to India was a really
I read that one. Lots to talk about in Passage to India.
Yes.
Just a twisty story and not sure what's really going on there in that one, but very good.
And I actually, since I do like that moniker, Queen of Books You've Never Heard of, All Passion Spent. I better read this with Chrissy from The Return Cart, who is now mostly on TikTok rather than YouTube, but she's great. We did sci-fi and we've done moderns, and like she just like equal opportunity. And All Passion Spent is about a woman whose husband has died and her children are, trying to figure out what to do with her now that she's a widow and retired and, I don't know, getting older. And she moves into this smaller house and everything starts to shift. And she's like considering her life and meeting someone from her past and a new person and just like reconsidering everything. And the All Passion Spent is like the hullabaloo is over and now I can sit calmly and assess and enjoy. And you know what? I don't want to have any children in my house, so I'm going to make that a rule. And she does that, and her children are like scared that she's gone off her rocker. And I'm like, wow, oh, this is gold. I loved it. So definitely recommend All Passion Spent by Vita Sackville West, who's like a famous name in the 20s and 30s. So yes.
I was just checking to see if it's on my list, and it is not.
So she may have another book on there. I don't know.
So like a couple of the other ones I had is this one, Passing by Nella Larson. I was surprised this one was written such a long time ago. It feels like it was written in a more modern kind of time. I've
Mhm.
also watched the adaptation of it. I read this
Oh,
last year.
uh-huh.
Very good adaptation of it as well. So, but yeah, very, very good one. I really liked this one last year.
I haven't seen the adaptation, but I read Passing, and I'm trying to remember if I read the other one because there were two in the copy that I got.
Oh,
Passing and
Quicksand. Is that
Quicksand. I
she
don't
wrote
think I
another?
did. I think I just read Passing because I was focusing on it for
Yeah.
the readathon. Yeah.
But I did like this one quite a bit. And it really worked as a buddy read as well last year. So yeah, that's a great, and it's a short one. If someone's looking
Yeah.
for a good buddy read, this one is great. And like Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half has a
Mhm.
similar concept to it. So it's really interesting to read one and then read the other one as well. So that
Oh,
was a great one.
yeah.
So yeah, what's another favorite of yours? Books you've
Uh,
never heard of?
have you read The Enchanted April?
I have not read that. I've heard of that one though. I haven't read it though.
So that was another buddy read I did with two other folks. The first year, I'll pop that in the chat. They were really entertaining discussions because you come at an old work with preconceptions, and so we
Oh,
had
interesting.
different, you know, appreciations for different characters.
Nice.
So, The Enchanted April, and I haven't watched the movie yet, and Ben has because I think he watched the adaptation for something. Ben Pick. Anyway, the book is about a few women who are strangers but meet each other and have this idea to put like an advertisement in the Times in London
Mhm.
to get together to rent a house in Italy together for a month. And
Oh.
they kind of get, someone who's a friend of a friend and someone who's a member of the club, and like they're good enough and they're vetted by society, right? But then they get to Italy and all hell breaks loose. So,
Wow.
not hell, but just like things slightly come off the rails in a beautiful way. And I
Hmm.
love the humor in the book and like the Englishness of it all. I wonder if Emma has watched this. Emma is a Londoner, and I think she would really like this. It's a romance comedy, so might be up her alley.
Still not on my list.
Well, it's
Checking.
another good one. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other one of the other ones that really surprised me how much I liked it was this one, Tarzan of the Apes. I haven't read
Oh,
Return of Tarzan, but Tarzan of the Apes, you're so familiar with the story after so many different adaptations of it. But Tarzan in the book is one significantly more violent than any of the adaptations I had seen.
oh,
And the ending is significantly different than any other ending I've ever seen on the adaptation. So I really like Tarzan of the Apes. Now, I understand like Return of Tarzan isn't as good, but Tarzan of the Apes, absolutely fantastic. So that's another really good one if people are looking for one. And an
yeah.
unexpected one, fairly easy read. So, except it's violent. Very,
Edgar
very
Rice
violent.
Burroughs. I had heard that someone was reading the series, and I think they got to the third one, and they're like, it significantly falls off. I just stick
Oh,
with like
yeah.
the first two, maybe, to get a taste, and like you're good.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think that I've heard similar that like the second isn't as good. I wonder if it's as it continues.
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I like that. Thank you, Richard. Hamilton was saying, I've bookmarked your Google Doc from last year as a guide for modern May reading. So awesome. Glad to know that's helpful. We've got other questions as well. I've put I've put books that are both my favorites and recommendations that I haven't read in the bookshop for like and the story graph for people to sort of wade through. So
Hmm.
it's interesting seeing people's reactions. What about themes? So I had
Hmm.
themes last year that I was like sex and empire and war and the other, and I can't remember what the fifth one, race. So
Oh.
like those are the types of things that I was sort of looking
Hmm.
to pull messages from. Did you sort of get a feel from modern literature, like what are your favorites or what are the most relevant or what like stood out to you in terms of themes from your modern reads?
I
Not
mean,
this year because this seems like a dud.
Well, I mean, I do think that like several of the books that I've read from that time period are deeply philosophical. That seems like it's this big part of the themes of that book. Even passing, same thing, very
Mhm.
philosophical kind of conversation about race in there as well. But the other one that I think I've seen a bit is if you think of like Steinbeck, poverty is in there, the depression is in there, and those themes come out in a lot of those writings as well. So, but the main one, I think I'm skewed because of this monstrosity.
Yeah, I think that's coloring your thinking a little bit. I definitely would second the poverty and like all the sort of
Mhm.
new movements, the labor movement and
Yeah.
socialism and communism, all these things were sort of vying for press and vying for votes and all these things across the world. And self-determination in colonies and stuff. So this was like the prime time for people to be embracing independence in some of the colonies of empires, which was interesting to see
Yeah.
in literature. Um, One of the books I read this year, which I loved, and Richard is gonna love. It's a by a Brit named George Orwell, and
Oh.
it's called The Road to Wigan Pier. And
Oh.
it's a book that he was commissioned to do as nonfiction. He went to the north of England and reported on conditions of coal miners and their life, their work, their difficulties, and sort of, you know, what it costs, cost of living. Speaking of cost
Mhm.
of living. And then the second half is him sort of meandering about why he's advocating socialism and a little bit about autobiographical, and then using that information to talk about class and
Oh, wow.
solidarity and how we get over ourselves, which is in a very modern and contemporary, like very relevant
Yeah.
to today. So I was like, oh, this is so good. I was just eating it up. It was good.
I mean, Orwell's big on class, or if you think of like Animal Farm as well, right? And how he uses animals to kind of tell a similar type of a story. Hi, Alice.
Yes.
So I've read 1984 and Animal Farm, but I've not read the one that you were talking about.
It's again, queen of books you've never heard of.
You're good at it. You're very good
Animal
at it.
Farm Animal Farm was one of, like, the freshman year of high school summer reads,
Hmm.
and I remember, like, What?" Like, not getting it and just, like, ugh, like, being dragged over the symbolism when I did have to discuss it, and I love English, so I was like, "If I don't like
Yeah.
the book."
Literature classes in school and
Yeah.
especially in college almost broke me for reading. It's like there's something about them that I just struggled with, and having to try and dig into the deeper meaning of these pieces. It was like I love to read and I hate literature classes.
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah,
know.
I
I
can
think
see
maybe
that.
it could just be the class that I took. It could be the instructor. It could be the format that I took it in. Could be any of those. But yeah, I was just one that okay, I just don't want to read these books anymore. It was really, really tough. So
It's hard because it can go both ways, like, what was the one I usually say I don't remember liking? Oh, Frankenstein. I hated
uh,
Frankenstein, right? I hated suffering through, the word what's the word that I counted how many times they said it, they used it in the book. I can't remember. I can't remember, I blocked it out now. So Frankenstein, Animal Farm, not so great, but Jane Eyre, like
yeah.
Pride and Prejudice, when I read those on my own and then discussed them in class, like, "Please, more, more, throw it at me."
I'm
So
reading Jane Eyre in July for my book club. It'll be a reread. I've read it. So I'm reading Jane Eyre in July and then Wide Sargasso Sea in September because they're
mm,
supposed to be related, right?
right.
Women in the Attic. That's what all I know about the two books. So Wide
Oh,
Sargasso Sea is supposed to be about the woman in the attic from Jane Eyre. That's what I know.
yes, because she's, um it's the West Indian/Caribbean slash Caribbean woman's viewpoint.
Ah, see?
So it's, like, told from her point of view and sort of, like, the other side of the pond and the other side of the imperialism, like,
Nice.
and how Mr. Rochester might not have, I don't know, been the be all and end all of accurate opinions when he was a young, dashing rake.
Well, I'm excited to reread Jane Eyre because I always remember what I remember is liking it, but don't remember the reasons why. And so, like, I'm just going to reread it and then read Wide Sargasso Sea so I have some idea of what it's talking about when I read that one. So, yeah, I'm excited. Should be good. Should be a good, you talk about summer plans. That's good book club stuff.
Yes. I had Eva give us a summer plan. Basically, she just came back from the water park and she said, so my kid ignores me at this water park. And so my updated summer plans are to read at the pool more.
Nice.
Pretty good. Pretty good. And Alice needs to know once again, what's the name of the big book you're reading?
Well, it's The Man Without Qualities by Robert Musil.
Yeah.
Alice. Yeah, I'm done with it though. And it'll be in my countdown next weekend. I haven't talked about it yet on my channel. And then I'll say what I decided about the 400 pages worth of alternate endings and character development and stuff then. Whether I like it or not.
Hearing what you just said about liking the story but not liking literature, I can have a clue about what you're going to be saying about the alternate endings.
Well, it was the literature class. I didn't like the class. And so the class itself was just, it became about knowing how to answer the quizzes is really what it became about, and not conversations about the story. You know, if it was conversations like this about talking about the characters and things like that, that's a lot more fun. But when it was just all quizzes, it's like, no, not for me.
All right.
I know.
What about how these themes that we notice relates to the period? So as a historical fiction author, I'm big into history, big history nerd, but there are things I discovered that happened in my reading of literature, and I'm like, I didn't know that happened in the world. That's crazy. Yeah. Let me Google, let me Wikipedia. And it's like mind opening, and you sort of go down a rabbit hole of interest. So is there anything in your modern reads that you were like, what? And like wanted to know more about in terms of historical happenings?
I can't think of one from a historical happening one. I mean, other than like if you think of the Grapes of Wrath and reading about that story. And then I read a modern, The Four Winds, which is kind of by Kristen Hanna, which is a very similar about the same time period.
Yeah.
But no, not as much about going down a rabbit hole. There was one book, but it wasn't set in the May of the modern time period, where it was like all these little snippets of facts. And that made me go in and go, how many of these were actually real? I'm trying to remember what it was. It's not, I can't remember the name of it now. Shoot, I'll have to look it up. But it wasn't a modern May of the modern book.
What was it? Nonfiction?
No, it wasn't nonfiction. It's going to bug me now.
I want to.
No, not as much. I mean, so every once in a while, I mean, I think when I read, again, not for May, not in this time period, I read Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates, which was a fictional retelling of Marilyn Monroe's life. And then that led me into wanting to learn more about Marilyn Monroe. I read a biography, things like that. So it can do that, but it's not, I haven't found one quite in this time period that's made me want to dig in and learn more about a particular event.
Okay. Yeah. I've got, so one that got away that I have not read yet is like Black Bread and Caviar, and it's about Russian Revolution stuff. And like, that is a situation I know very little about, didn't learn about in my history reading or any of my research for books or college or, politics very much. So diving into that, it's definitely like I'm in a cave and there's howling winds and I'm going, what is going on? I don't know. I can't contextualize anything.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see, I'm reading Frank O'Connor now, and he talks about W.B. Yeats and James Joyce, and I read James Stevens earlier, and I read J.B. Singe a couple years ago with Lana. So there's like a gathering, shall we say. There's a gathering of Irish writers that now I can sort of use to, they reference each other, and I'm like, okay, so this is what he was seen as because of these things in his book. And that's not something you generally study either, like Irish literature of the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. And so that's pretty fascinating because that was during the
That's
Civil War.
so hard though.
Like,
Joyce is like, oh, so I've
not
only
all of him, not all of him.
I've read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and I came away going, what was that book?
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
terrified of Ulysses. And it's just one of those things I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to. It's on my list of books to read, and I'm so intimidated by it. It's probably one of the few books I have left that I'm intimidated by. After having read like War and Peace and some other bit and Les Mis and those,
Yeah.
that one is one because I've heard it. Is it Stream of Consciousness too, Ulysses, or no? I don't actually know the
Um,
answer to that.
I don't know. I
I
think
have
it
to look.
shifts. I think there's more than one storytelling style because Frank O'Connor talks about Ulysses as having a very genius beginning and like the first
Mm.
half, and then it sort of shifts, and like there's a sort of a letdown of the premise, and he's like ripping it to shreds. So
Wow.
very interesting.
Yeah, I
The
think Britta Bowler, she left me a message this morning. I think she's started Ulysses again. So I'm like, well, I'm excited to hear what you think of it when
Yeah,
we get through it. But
not when you have scheduled out.
no, I don't own it yet. If I so my when I'm compiling my list of what I'm going to read in the year, my 52 that I pre-select, I always start with what I own. And I start with those and then go from there. So I've
Yes.
avoided buying Ulysses because I don't want to end up with it on my TBR. So
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
so I just kind of keep putting it off, putting it off. I was kind of having similar feelings like with Virginia Woolf because I've struggled with her writing. I couldn't get through Mrs. Dalloway. It's one of my few DNFs
Really?
I've done on my
Okay.
1001 list. So is Thomas Mann book, by the way, Dr. Faustus.
Ah,
But I have two of her books now, so those ones I'm trying to get more on board with reading her writing because she's the most represented female author on the list with like
interesting.
nine books, I think.
Wow. Is To the
Yeah.
Lighthouse on the list?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That was
Yep.
on my list of like second tier, and I did not get to it this month.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I don't know what her writing is like. Oh, the only one I've read of hers is the Room of One's Own, which is nonfiction. So I really don't
Yeah.
know her fiction writing style.
I have that one as well. It's short. It's very short.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good though. Like that's the sort of one I can read over and over again and sort of see
Mhm.
something different each time. I really like that one.
Yeah. It is a good one. I mean, I can't say it's a good one. I've not read A Room of One's Own yet. But she's again just that author I haven't quite connected with. I haven't found the
Yeah.
right story yet. My only real experience, I read Orlando, which was decent, and then I've read or DNF Mrs. Dalloway. So
Interesting.
Orlando is another one that's surprising that it was written when it was, because it was also written, I believe, back in the same May of the Moderns time period, but it feels like it could have been written anytime, like now. Interesting.
I don't think it could have been written before that.
No.
I
You
think it
don't think
was
so?
one of these like we're tearing down walls, we're asking
Mm,
ourselves what is art, we're like creating new languages. I definitely think it was like that period, the essence, and
mm.
I definitely don't get it, most of it. It's one of those I need a guide for, you know?
Yeah. I
Um,
I think too, I've heard a couple things like audiobooks with hers can help.
mm,
Reading it with someone can help for Virginia Woolf. I haven't done either one of those yet because I'm still in denial that I have so many of her books left to
well,
read.
I have a copy of To the Lighthouse, so, you know, if you need to call a girl, I'm
Oh,
here.
for a buddy read. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Alice is saying, sounds interesting. I've been listening to the Code of the Worcesters for May of the Moderns, and it's making me laugh a lot. Excellent. I'm guessing that's PG Woodhouse with the Worcester
Woosters.
cheese and Worcesters series. And Emma says, I've just finished Leave It to Smith for May of the Moderns, and I don't recognize that one. So maybe is it a short story or a novella?
A
Let us know.
book that Margaret has not heard of. You're supposed to be the one bringing those.
And then Hamilton said Dubliners is his shorter collection you could try. If
I've
Portrait of
read
the
Dubliners.
Artist,
I'm lying. I did read Dubliners
oh,
earlier this year with Anne Novella. And so I've read two James Joyce. I just can't remember anything. My goodness.
oh,
I'm so sorry.
The Devil and Nurse is pretty simple to read, and it's just sort of like, okay, what did we get from all those little tales? What do we get as the full picture? And you sort of have to compile it yourself. It's like
Yeah.
a
Lots
IKEA
of death.
furniture.
Lots of death in that little set of short stories.
Yeah.
But Anne Novello and I, when we were reading it, she was like, the only thing I remember is the woman on a boat. And I go, and my response back to her was, there was a boat.
I don't remember a boat. I remember a house.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but it was
A long time ago.
yeah. It's just one of those when I look at the intimidating kind of ones that yeah, I'm definitely intimidated by James Joyce and Thomas Mann to a part because he's also one of the ones I've DNF'd a book. And Dr. Faustus, I had it checked out from the library. I renewed it like 4 times and just couldn't get past like the page 20 and then just said, I surrender.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Hamilton's asking, any thoughts on Edna St. Vincent Millay? I only know her as a poet. If she's written fiction, I don't know it. And
doesn't know it. That's sorry.
So I haven't read her unless it's been in like a big, is she American? She doesn't sound American, but I have a vague, like, is she in my big American lit textbook from college? I don't know. So obviously no thoughts. Sorry about that. All right. So other events, I've got the Russian Revolution, the Irish Civil War. A lot of the ones that I was reading this year and last year were about the interwar period and trying to get at, like, I had never heard or studied in school what's his name, Mosley, Oswald Mosley, and the black shirts. And so people would say black shirt movement and know all about it, and I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, no idea.
Really. But I have a sense, like, because of Jacqueline Winspear, who's a historical novelist, she actually describes him in her mysteries that like go from the late 1920s to World War II. And, he's a very persuasive speaker. He spoke to the masses in the interwar period and in the run up to World War II in a manner that was trying to get people together towards like a fascist type of government takeover of Britain. And yeah, so like didn't know that happened, and all the Nazi sympathizers and everything. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like revisiting this history because sometimes today feels too much, but you can always like look back and say, okay, this happened then, and let's put that into context. This was there, and now we're going through a version of that. And I don't know, it makes me feel better.
I do like it when authors refer to other authors though, and other pieces of literature. Like this one definitely had that with Goethe. I can never say it. Goethe. Yeah,
that's how I would say it.
Reference that in this as well. Lots of different kind of. I like it when authors are doing that as well and referencing other works. I think that's really fascinating. That's definitely in this one.
Nice.
So, Dia's here. I skipped ahead to the comments. Hi.
Yes, says, I'm almost finished with Mrs. Dalloway. Heavy on the stream of consciousness. I'm just trying to go with the flow without understanding everything. So,
and I think that was my mistake. Yeah, I do think that was my mistake because I didn't know. I think when I read it, I didn't really understand what stream of consciousness was as far as just kind of how or what it was trying to do. So I was trying to grasp a story of it, and that didn't work. I had picked it up after reading The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Yes. That's, I thought, oh, I want to read that now. And then I didn't have the right mindset for it. So I think that mindset of just reading it and going with the flow is probably the right way to read that book. And maybe I'd have more luck if I tried reading it now. Possible. But at the time, I didn't grasp that.
Hamilton says, I discovered a St. Vincent Millay in a university lit class. Very nice. Novel idea. Summer goals, summer book bingo, and lots of buddy reads. Yes.
I have one this month with Dia.
Nice. You just had your June buddy read Baganza video, right? So
many, but I don't know. So I do know what happened at the beginning of the year. I was putting people off saying, oh, later in the year, let's try June. And then when I went and looked and saw how many people I said do June, I was like, oh, I put a lot of people in June. I didn't mean to.
I have been on that train with you. I think when we put something on, you're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love buddy reads, and I'm so glad that I have so many opportunities to buddy read with people because it is one of my favorite ways to read the books. It's just I have to now schedule and say not have too many start at one time, which everyone I have read with, everyone's so flexible and easy and just move things around, which is great. But I think ours we had and then kept pushing, and then it ended up being December.
Oh my gosh.
For regeneration last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Margaret.
I don't know, maybe like 4 months.
Yeah, it was several months.
It's all good. It was a really good book, by the way.
It
Everyone,
was.
not
That
a
was our
modern
first
lit
live
book.
show. It was about regeneration.
What was?
Regeneration was your and my first live show.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's not a book from the period, but it's a book about the period.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And I've got 2 other Pat Barkers that I've like accumulated that I'm like, I'm saving this because I really liked her writing.
Are they the continuation? Because that regeneration's a trilogy.
And you said 1 and 3 are in your list, but
Yeah,
not the
and 2 second.
I don't have the second one. They're standalones. They're not related.
Oh, okay.
The ones that I have, yeah.
Yeah. White Sargasso Sea is that's I'm so excited to pick that one up. I think it'll be good.
So if you've got questions for us about the readathon or I don't know, modern literature, pop it in the chat. I think my last sort of prompt question is about the one that got away. So if there are books that still sort of like have that lingering quality of, oh, I wish I had read that one, but now you'll never have another May of the Moderns. What are you going to look for a different opportunity? Because there's plenty of other opportunities to fit in these books. But like what books are still in that category? I've got like 5 or 6 that I was like, oh, yes, these are still in my recommends. But
Out of Africa was the one. Yep. I didn't get
Okay.
to. That's definitely the one that got away this month because I had wanted to read it specifically for May of the Moderns. And now I'm like, maybe I can fit it in the next 3 days.
Nice.
You never know.
Try.
I think I have a Francis Ford Maddox book, The Good Soldier, as well. I think that's in that time period, if I remember correctly. But I hadn't planned on reading it in this
Is
May.
that the right name? I think Ford Maddox Ford is an author.
Ford Maddox Ford. I said Francis Ford Maddox. That's not right. That's Francis Ford Coppola.
I was like, it could be another one, but I'm like, there's
no, I'm combining Francis Ford Coppola and
yes, there you go.
Yeah, Ford Maddox Ford. Just to keep things lively.
No. Like it.
He wrote The Godfather, right? No, that's completely not true. That was Mario.
Right. I've got Voyage in the
Dark. Out of Africa is the one that got away. A Room with a View we'll read next month, so I'm not too worried about that one. But Out of Africa, I wanted to read it because I wanted to watch the adaptation, and I'm one of those people I can't watch the adaptation unless I've read the book.
Isn't it Meryl Streep?
Yep, Robert Redford.
Yeah.
So someone had left a comment that said the adaptation's horrible. I don't watch it. So
oh no, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
We'll see. I have so many. Oh, thank you. I have so many books in that time period to read. So Native Son, if I would have realized that one is on my summer list. So
that's on my list. That's on my list too. Yeah. I've got Voyage in the Dark by Jean Reese, which we talked about earlier, which I will be reading in June, hopefully while I'm in California.
Nice.
I've got a book called Cain by Jean Toomer.
That's on my list.
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
So that's one of my I think it'll be really good. Kind of like if you like Zora Neale Hurston, that's another great one from this period. Like Their Eyes Were Watching God. Didn't read it in high school somehow and read it for this and was like blown away. So
yeah.
But yeah, Cain I think will also appeal to the same audience. So I'm excited about that. I still haven't read a Daphne du Maurier. So I've got Rebecca on my list.
Wow. I read Rebecca a number of years ago. And so now I'm like, I want to kind of do a reread of it and refresh. So one thing about having my channel is that now I can go back and watch what I thought about the books that I don't remember. So.
Yeah. Do you write reviews anywhere online to like keep track?
I do on Goodreads. I used to do more on Goodreads, and then I kind of stopped. And so now I think my only real written out reviews are if I have an arc for something.
Ah.
But I haven't been writing them, and I definitely don't have historical reviews. In a lot of cases on my historical books that I've read, I don't even have a star rating. So I'm like, I have no idea, no clue. So
Are you part of like the oldie crowd of book readers that had some sort of online book review platform before Goodreads, and Goodreads like imported?
no,
Okay, all
no.
right. So I had
I have a
Safari
spreadsheet.
before. Yeah.
I'm that old school. I had a spreadsheet of the 1,001 books that
Ah.
I was working my way through, and then I changed jobs and I lost that spreadsheet. So there's
Oh,
a number of books
that's
on the
so
1,001 list I look at and I go, did I read that or didn't I read that? And so I'm not,
oh,
yeah.
that's tough. That's tough. I have migrated since from Goodreads to Storygraph. So now I mostly put reviews on when I'm doing readathons or when I
Yeah.
think other people might be interested. When it's just like my romance and my mystery comfort reads, I'm like, no one's looking at my review of this. It's got hundreds and thousands of reviews. I don't need to put anything. But yeah.
I mean, if I get an advanced reader copy, I feel like I owe the publishing company and the author
Yeah,
my formal review.
that makes
Outside of
sense.
that, I tend to not as much.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that Dia is saying this is a modern book now in November by Josephine Johnson,
Mm.
but it didn't come in time to read in May, unfortunately. So now she's waiting until November, which makes sense with the title, but that's a bummer. And she also has two new to me Du Maurier that she hasn't picked up yet. Is one of them called The Hungry Hill or something like that? Because that was in my list for this year. I think it's 1944 or 45, and it's one of her earlier works, and it's set in Ireland in a country house, and the reviews are all bad, but I'm still going to read it. I'm still interested. And then Annalise says Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann is another TBR veteran that I still haven't got around to.
It's also on my list. It's on my list too. Yeah,
Okay.
that and Joseph and his brothers are both on my massive list. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, it's just there's a number of books, like when you talk about Queen of Books you've never heard of, I flip through this book and go, there's a lot that I haven't read or heard of yet. And so I'm kind of one of my years for my selection of the books I'm going to read might be titled All the Books You've Never Heard of. And just these random ones that are just obscure titles.
Shout out to Margaret.
Yeah, shout out to Margaret when I do that. We can do a buddy one. If you want to help host my book club, we'll have Margaret help host.
That would be super fun. That would be super fun. You know, maybe I'll put my bookseller hat. I'm wearing a t-shirt from the bookstore I used to work at.
Nice.
Yeah, but like sometimes sourcing things that no one's heard of can be difficult as well. So
Yeah. That was one thing with the book club. That's an excellent point. Hi, Greg. We were just talking.
Were your ears
burning? That is one thing for like the book club is trying to make sure I'm not picking books where there's like 2 copies out there and they're hundreds of dollars, because that doesn't, I want more participation.
Right.
So every book I've selected, trying to make sure it's available in multiple formats, that you can find it inexpensively, those pieces. And so you are absolutely correct. Having the obscure books might be, you just blew my idea, Margaret. I'm just kidding.
But I mean,
that's an excellent point.
You know, there's places like Persephone, which is my little like favorite that I like to shout out during May of the Moderns. Persephone Books is a publisher in Bath, England, and they do all these pretty gray books with like gorgeous end papers.
Oh, yes.
From like the time.
Gina has had those on her channel several times. I've seen those on her.
Gina? Yes.
Yeah,
Gina's a big fan.
Yeah.
But they're hard to find over here. And so like I went and I got 3 when I visited the bookstore in London, when they were in London before they moved. But they specialize in especially sort of domestic fiction written by women, late 19th, early 20th century. And I was like, this is perfect for the moderns. But
can I live here in your store?
Yeah. They decided not to sponsor me, which is fine. But yes, so some presses bring those back, and sometimes you'll find like a vintage press or a Virago version or a, academic press that brings
Yeah.
it back. And so
Yeah.
if you see those, you'd be like, "Oh, look, $17, not that bad."
Yeah. There have been a couple of books that I've had to put on a cannot find list because
Ah,
either they're $700, $800 or I just can't find them. And I'm still hunting. Like when I go to a random bookstore in the middle of nowhere, I might ask
your
about it.
list on your phone, like
I do. So when I go to a place like Half Price Books, I have my list up on my phone and I am walking through the general
yeah,
fiction area, kind of going scanning, seeing if something looks familiar and then checking it and then going back. That is one of my fun ways to spend my free time. It's very strange, but I love doing that.
yeah. I do that with my local used bookstore too, and like
Yeah.
whatever's top of mind. There's so many. There's like 1,000 books on my wish list on StoryGraph,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's really like whenever they come, they'll come. It'll be fate. It'll be
Yeah.
kismet. So
I have been using my library a lot more this year than I did last year, which has made a big difference as well. Just trying not to buy um, as many books. I don't know
true.
if Project Gutenberg would have some of them. So if they're in the public domain, yes, but a couple of them are not. They're newer, somewhat newer. They just weren't as popular for some reason. Then they just went out of print, and you can't find them. I
Yeah.
look constantly look,
Yeah.
but
I had two more on my one that got away list. So one is called So Big by Edna Ferber. Is
oh.
that on your list?
Uh, I can check.
No. It's called
It
So
doesn't
Big.
sound familiar, so I'm gonna guess probably not, but
It's been reprinted. So it's one of these old books that like has a new life because it was, I don't know, someone picked it up and thought it would sell. And it's a novel about Chicago and the World's Fair sort of aftermath and like rural, urban, and like changing times kind of split. And I was really interested in reading it 2 years ago because I was
yeah.
researching that for my novel. And I have since shelved that novel or drawered that novel or buried that novel manuscript because I'm just like stuck on it.
Oh,
So Chicago, bleh. Um, and then the last one I have is called I Am a Cat by Soseki Natsume, which is supremely popular in Japan. Still
oh,
very printed, very popular school activities in Japan. Um, and I am still on the hold list at the library for that one, like 2 months later. So
yeah, that one is not on. Neither one of those are, but
okay.
so sad. Nope.
I
But
will
like I said, I
eventually.
have a large number in here that I haven't read yet. That will be coming up. That just so many in here. Ethan Frome is another one. That one's coming up. That one was published in 1911.
I love Edith Wharton's words. Oh,
Yeah.
such a gorgeous
I've
writer.
read Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. I'm flipping in my book. It's really the thing I really like about this is so they put a summary in here, but I never read the summary ever.
Spoiler, spoiler.
I know. The
Yeah.
39 steps is on my TBR for this year, and it is so short. It's like this thick. So excited.
Well, it's kind of like the Stephen King novellas that get turned into movies. Like it's a
Yeah.
short story, but it's got all this stuff going on
Yeah.
that make for a great adaptation.
I think Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption or in Shawshank, that was a very short one. It's in like one of his 4 novel bindups. And it was adapted into the Shawshank Redemption, which is my favorite book movie of all time.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very
I
nice.
was I was laying awake a few nights ago and I was like, how does Shawshank Redemption end? And I was just like stuck because I'd seen a little bit of it and I couldn't remember the ending. So I had to like Google to go back
I
to
do
sleep.
not remember the ending.
It had been years since I've seen it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I do have a plan for September for all these little short books. So I'm kind of excited.
40 September?
Yes, yes. And I may be trying to do the 30 book and 30-day challenge.
Oh God. Oh God.
Maybe, maybe. I may have a stack of like 20 very short books over on my bookshelf for that.
Have you scheduled a leave of work for this?
I am off 10 days in September.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah.
that could help. Yeah.
So it should be good. Yeah, it should be really good. So when you talk about summer plans, August, I am not doing anything. I'm
That's
not
right. It's your
doing
month
any
off.
buddy reads.
Yeah.
I'm not doing my health and body series. I'm not doing subscriber favorites. I'm not doing discover new author. I'm doing nothing in August at all. And so whatever I read in August is just going to be what I want to read in August. And and kind of gearing up for September and knowing I want to try and do 30 books in 30 days. And so, yeah, August is just going to be whatever I decide to read. And I purposely didn't do any buddy reads. So this last year, I did a buddy read with Fraser Simon of A Suitable Boy, which was 1,400 pages. And we did it super fast because we wanted to get it done before I left on my camping trip. That was a mistake. Very big mistake. So yeah.
Yeah. So Dia was talking about Project Gutenberg. Just in case anyone doesn't know, it's for books that are in the public domain. Someone started a sort of helpful, nonprofit-oriented mission of scanning in old books that are available for the public as ebooks. It would be ebook, and you might find old books that way.
It's funny because Dia doesn't read ebooks.
I read them rarely. I try to put them in my diversity tracker of at least once a month, but sometimes it doesn't make it on the list.
Yeah.
So.
Ebooks saved me in the height of the pandemic because I could check out ebooks from the library and not actually even have to go pick something up. And that was incredibly helpful. I kept reading quite a bit.
Nice. Hamilton asks, how about Agatha Christie or other mystery authors in the modern era? So one of the prompts this year was for genre, and a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon to add mysteries. So tell us, yes.
My favorite Agatha Christie is And Then There Were None. Right. I've read it twice now. There's kind of an idea if you could have any book that you wanted to forget, so you could reread it again, what book would it be? And Then There Were None. Because even in a reread, I knew kind of how it ended, but I still was not sure because it had me so just confused as to what was happening. But I love these bind ups too. I have 3 different ones. This one has in it Cricket House and Endless Night as well, but And Then There Were None. And then it has these really cool pen papers and gold edges.
The publisher of that edition, because it is really pretty. Look on the spine, or
it doesn't say on the spine. HarperCollins. Yeah. And this one, And Then There Were None, was published in 1939.
Very cool.
So yeah, it fits that. I did pull it out because it is one of my favorites. So yeah, good job, Hamilton, bringing Agatha Christie up, so I could show you my pretty book.
I have read Dorothy Sayers because I read the group biography about the women in the square who were writers during the 20s that Roz talked about a couple of years ago. I'm blanking on the title now, but it was recent, like in the past 3 years. And Dorothy Sayers was one of the writers, and her life was really interesting. The piece of her life that they followed for the group biography. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder what her fiction was like. And then I read the fiction and it was like, oh. So it's very stripped down, not very deep, very quick, very dialogue based. I imagine kind of like Agatha Christie, but not as heavily plotted underground kind of thing.
I've read Whose Body, and then I read Murder Must Advertise by Dorothy L. Sayers. Both of them with Kevy from St. Kevy, by the way.
And
did not like them. There was a lot in it that just didn't quite. Whose Body is only a 100-page book, and so Kevin and I both were like, we're gonna fly through this book. And a week later, we were both going, I'm struggling. Because it just didn't work. Something about her writing Murder Must Advertise was better than Whose Body. But the main detective character too, I just didn't enjoy him.
And it's a whole series. Like there's a lot of books that she wrote, and I think that it was very popular in the time period, which is why I'm like, there's something that's not translating.
Yeah.
Something about that devil may care attitude that is turning us off now that was just like so fascinating or fashionable then, you know?
Probably.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Dia says, hope the selection paralysis. I think that's
She's
for
talking to me. Yeah, I can get selection paralysis when I have no set reading plans. Then I don't know what to pick up, and then I pick 5 books thinking I'm going to select one, and then I select nothing, and just can't decide what I'm going to read. That happened to me a couple months ago. So yeah,
that's like me, but not with books because I don't have that with books. I just have it with everything else in life, Dia. Hamilton says there's Garb August to think about, but she's not trying to do anything in August.
Well, the good news is that I love reading trashy romance, and so it may fit for Garb August, just by design, just by luck. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Sandy's face when I was talking about Dorothy. Yeah. So that's Dorothy Sayers, but I finished a book that I haven't talked about yet. So it'll be in my next Wednesday wrap up by Dorothy Parker. Have you read any Dorothy Parker?
No.
Okay. I don't know anything about her life except that she has now been made into a character in her own mystery series. Like a modern author has treated her. I think she's got like 3 books in a series about a detective, Dorothy Parker.
Wow.
So she must have sort of an interesting life that's being fictionalized. Wow. But this book was a collection of short stories called Laments for the Living. And in the same way that Frank O'Connor, I'm in the section where he's talking about lonely voices, and it's short stories about like lonely people in the Irish countryside and Irish towns. Dorothy Parker was talking about people in the city, a lot of New York City setting, that are lonely and sort of tragic, but like she takes a snippet that's small enough that it's like funny if you don't zoom out to their whole life, like it's a lot about men and women dating or talking at odds at what's it called? Cross purposes. And that sort of thing. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't read any by Parker.
Yeah, so that was my first one. It's a 1930 edition, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
So yeah, it's like old. I had to be careful with it.
I got a book from the library. It's a 1976 edition. Is that crazy? And they've had it for a long time at the library because there's 2 very old school
nice.
check out things in here that are very much old library.
Whole systems have passed.
So yeah. That's what not May of the Modern. So that's 1976.
I'm gonna say Elizabeth Taylor. There's Elizabeth Taylor, the actress, but then there's like an Elizabeth Taylor author.
Yep. This is the second one, the British author, Elizabeth Taylor.
I read something of hers last year that was sad, tragicomic. Is that a sense? Are you reading that now?
Yes, I'm reading it now.
Is that the sense you're getting from it?
Don't know yet. I was still trying to understand what's happening. I've only read about 100 pages. It's only a couple 100 pages long, but it's kind of like, what is going on here? So,
okay.
It's a little new still.
I liked reading the one that I read, which was about old people retiring to a hotel to like be not in a home, but like independent, but like not really independent, and like holding out for as long as they could in London. I liked reading it. It was funny and heartwarming, but then I got to the end and the resolution was like, what?
Yeah.
No. So like, yeah, Dorothy Parker had an interesting life, says Hamilton, founding member of the Algonquin Club of Writers, which I've heard of but don't know much about either. And she left her estate to the NAACP. That's a really cool fact.
That's very cool.
So I think maybe my next step is to buy that first novel in the series about her as a fictional character, because that's a fun way to read it.
Your next rabbit hole. Dorothy Parker is going to be your next rabbit hole, because then you'll go find out all this other stuff about her. Maybe.
Yes. Maybe. She strikes me as the kind of person who would be like, who's that NPR talker who also writes nonfiction books like about the Puritans, and she has a very high squeaky voice, and she's like a researcher par excellence. She's written a book about like Hawaii and the native population. Like anyone? I'm gonna go grab her book off the shelf if I can't remember. No,
Ira Glass is
not
what
Ira Glass. Okay, hold on for 10 seconds.
I'll just keep everyone entertained somehow out here. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could do a live show by myself and having to talk by myself for a long period of time. Margaret's back. Sarah Val.
Have you heard of Sarah Vowell?
No.
She's hilarious in a talk show situation, but also like a researcher par excellence, as I was saying.
Yeah.
So like, now I forgot what I was talking about that made me think of it.
Dorothy Parker rabbit holes.
She makes me think of Sarah Vowell in terms of like the personality. So
there you go.
If you know, you know. But if that reference, just throw it out if you don't want it. Oh, some good guesses. Mary Louise Kelly. Nope. Bye, Greg. Dia couldn't think of it either.
Could you hear me talking when you were gone? Because I was like, I don't know if I can host a live show by myself.
Because you couldn't talk on your own for like 10 seconds. You did fine.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we're over an hour now, though.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Sorry, I missed watching the end of the time there. Well, we got through all of my questions, and then we sort of kept ad-libbing. So, yeah, let me take that.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear you're not going to be hosting May of the Moderns again.
There will be other things, and then maybe this frees me up to do, I don't know, that whole writing thing that's supposed to be the whole career thing, you know.
Oh, details.
Details. But it's been super fun, and yeah, modern literature, worth it. So give it a try. That's like, I guess, our takeaway lesson.
Well, thank you for having me on to talk about modern literature. I definitely read a lot of it. So
yes. And, you know, I think you'll probably go through more cycles of putting up who wants to buddy read these on the list, because you're always up for help as long as it's not August.
Yes. Yeah. August is a no-go anymore.
So. Yes. Boundaries are good. So that concludes our last buddy chat live stream for May of the Moderns, and I will be doing the wrap up next Sunday of the whole readathon, and the last wrap up of books read this Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to Sandy if you don't know her yet, and we'll all see you soon. Happy reading and take care.
Thank you.